Come and visit the new Ajib Bank today. Ajib is the only Islamic bank in the Gambia. We offer Sharia compliant services, products and financing modes. Ajib have invested in ultra-modern technology in the state-of-the-art core Islamic banking software IMAL. Ajib ATMs are located in our branches at Banjul, New Joshuan, Brikama, Basse, QCell head office and Brisubi turntable. You can check your balance, withdraw cash, get your mini statement and much more. Ajib also provides 24/7 internet banking, which offers you the comfort of banking from your office or your homes. Come and visit the new Ajib Bank today and enjoy our services delivered by a team of banking professionals. For a limited time, you can get an Ajib ATM card absolutely free. For more information, contact us on 346-6666 or 327-7777. Ajib, your partnership bank.
Thank you for joining us on our QTV Business and Economy program. The Business and Economy program is intended to promote the ideals of a corporate Gambia identity with the objective of forging partnerships through dialogue between the public and the private sector, civil society organizations, and the international community. We continue our engagement on the economy, issues of relevance, macroeconomic issues of paramount importance. And today we have invited a distinguished personality who needs no introduction. But for the benefit of the viewers who may not be aware of who he is, we have invited the Honorable Momodu Sabali, once Budget Director at the Ministry of Finance and also Minister responsible for Presidential Affairs and Secretary General of the Civil Service. Honorable Sabali, welcome to Business and Economy.
Thank you, Honorable Ben. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you on the program. Before we start on the program, I want to get your opinion in general in terms of what your take is on the macroeconomic environment. How has it been? And in particular, I'm referring to the recent Forbes Business Ranking Index. I'm sure you would have seen the index. But before we even get into the specifics of that index, in general, what is your assessment of the economy?
Well, I'm generally satisfied with the macroeconomic situation. I know when you talk of macroeconomy, people have different perspectives. Of course, the consumer, the ordinary citizen, is measuring the economy by how much money is in his or her pocket. Mm-hmm. But as a professional economist and a macroeconomist for that matter, I know people know me for mainly for the fiscal side, which is my role at the budget. I did 10 years at Central Bank as a macroeconomist, analyzing macroeconomic data. And I know with that background, your first thought is macroeconomic stability. Mm-hmm. Given the background, coming from the political impasse in 2016, mm-hmm. and at that particular time, I had my worst fears ever. Mm-hmm. For the Gambian economy. Moving into 2017, 2018, the economy is largely stable. We've seen, according to figures from the Central Bank, of course, they recording a 4.6% real economic growth in 2017. Mm-hmm. That's a rebound from 0.4% in 2016. Mm-hmm. The forecast for 2018 is 5.4%, and we have inflation hovering at around 6.6%. As at July 2018. Mm-hmm. In terms of the external balance, the central bank is recording an improvement in the first 6 months of 2018, year on year. Mm-hmm. Exchange rates, the domestic debt mm-hmm. is reported to have remained the same year on year from 2017. Knowing all of this and knowing also the lag effect in terms of impact of macroeconomic policy, I am largely satisfied with the situation of the economy. Okay. When it comes to the Forbes report, of course, this is scary, and I don't think anybody in their right mind should downplay it, unless if you don't know what Forbes means to the business world. What they're recording is not good for us, and I believe these projections, these prognostics can never be perfect, especially in the developing world where we have data issues. You and I know that you've done time series research. I know that of you in terms of macroeconomic activities. We have data issues, and these reports are never perfect, but they are an indication because there's a comparison year on year. I think what I read from the Forbes report is that we are not doing too well in terms of sentiments of potential investors, and that's not good for us because the government is calling for private sector-led development. And if we are going to be able to make any mark in that direction, we need to boost confidence of potential investors, and that means taking concrete steps in terms of making adjustments for us to have a better perception.
I want to touch on a couple of issues that you had mentioned in your intervention and your take on the overall macroeconomic aspect of the economy. I hosted last week here the principal statistician from GBOS and a statistician as well, Barrow and Suso. And during our discussion, we pretty much talked about some of the macroeconomic aggregates of the economy. And he mentioned how a rebasing has been done of the economy in terms of GDP, debt to GDP levels. And I smirked when he mentioned that with this rebasing, I think they used 2015, 2016 as the base year, which is yet to come into effect, but from the preliminary works that they are doing. And by the time that this, we adopt 2015, 2016 as the new base year, the gross debt as a ratio of GDP would have come down from 130% to under 100%. And you know, and I know, that rebasings are done when a particular year, for example, the previous rebase year was 2004. But if the economy and the statisticians deem it that 2004 is no longer of relevance as, say, for example, 2015, 2016, then one would undertake a rebasing. In that show, I did not have the opportunity to go into specifics regarding the rebasing and how gross domestic debt as a level of GDP would have dropped from 130% to 100%. But what's your take on that? Because as long as the economy is concerned, the debt levels owed by government is still the same, despite the basing, in terms of nominal terms. Yeah. So do you think that in itself is a prudent?
I think the actual mentioning of debt to GDP ratios in tandem with the rebasing of the GDP, I think is pretty disingenuous because I'm a critic of GBOS. We've been always, those of us who've been in the macroeconomic side, and we've been having these debates. We understand their constraints. We try to make do with what they give us. But when you're coming up with a rebasing, just give me a better reason for rebasing. If you tell me about debt to GDP ratio, for me, to be quite honest, I'll just see that you're trying to tinker with the numbers. Yeah. I'm hoping that GBOS has a better reason for rebasing, but linking it to debt GDP ratios, because this debt is actually, apart from this ratio that you use to exude macroeconomic stability and fiscal prudence, this is money you pay, and you are going to repay that money, whether you rebase or not. Yes. Your creditors do not care. So I guess maybe there was a communication problem here, because I don't think any institution that deals with data, national data for instance, would come up with such a quite
Yeah, I think he was. We were actually discussing the CPI.
Yeah.
And I made the point that if you look at the CPI, meat as a component of the CPI basket has a greater weight than fish. But we know that fish is consumed to a larger extent, percentage of the population, and even affordability as well. So fish should have had a higher weight than meat did. And then he mentioned that, yes, we've realized that issue, as it were, and that is why we are doing a rebasing at the moment. And in the new rebasing, fish has a greater weight than meat. And then that was where he now extended and spoke about how the rebasing would actually have resulted in gross domestic, our debt as a ratio of gross domestic product coming down. But anyway.
No, I just wanted to comment on the CPI rebasing, because I find that actually interesting. We've also been criticizing them a lot about the CPI. But for such a very pragmatic approach to the rebasing, I'm really impressed, because what you're saying is a no-brainer. You know, we consume more fish than meat. So I'm impressed by that move. I hope they did similar analysis in terms of other categories. I think, yeah, those are things which definitely anybody who knows anything about how Gambians live would definitely agree with G-Boss on such a move. Yeah.
The President of the Republic, I'm not sure if he is back, but he went to attend the UNGA. In the 2017 UNGA, during his address, he mentioned how Gambia as a country has actually improved in its Global Competitiveness Index ranking from 123rd position in 2016-2017 to 117th in 2017-2018. And he took credit for that improvement. Fast track, and I mean, it was positive, because for me, the mere fact that during his UNGA address, he mentioned how Gambia has improved in its CGI ranking, for me, I was quite intrigued, primarily because I was of the view that if he is tracking this, or whoever, I mean, the Office of the President is tracking this, then they must understand and appreciate the relevance of tracking the CGI or even the Forbes Business Index ranking, amongst other indices that the World Bank provides, the World Economic Forum provides as well. But we fast-tracked to 2018, and then we're hit with the Forbes ranking. And the Forbes ranking, perhaps we can now begin to go into specifics, ranks the Gambia 152nd out of 153 countries. And the Global Competitiveness Index ranking in 2016-2017 ranked the Gambia 117 out of 123 countries. I mean, out of 117 out of 135 countries. Now, I know the indices are different, but indicatively, you would agree that 117th ranking out of 135 countries is way better than 52 out of 153 countries. Second to last, pretty much, worldwide. What do you think could be the reasons as to why the variance between the two indices and the way they have ranked the Gambia, especially considering that the Forbes also takes cue from the CGI ranking, as it were?
Well, I think what happened here is, you mentioned the President's address at the UN General Assembly and taking credit for improved ranking. I think you'll agree with me that even though there are hard numbers like GDP among the parameters these institutions are using, there is a perception aspect of it also, which is also fundamentally important. So the improved ranking that President Barrow referred to, and he took credit for it, I wouldn't blame him for taking credit for it, because what I see mainly in that particular one is what I would call the Yaya Jammeh effect. Because we all knew that Jammeh had a perception problem, and he didn't make it any easier for himself. Some of the statements and actually practical action also. Government has had several issues with foreign investors in particular, cancelling contracts unduly, confiscating businesses. All of those things, they feed into the wire, and it doesn't help the perception. So just taking Jammeh out of the equation definitely improves perception, for instance. And if Barrow takes credit for that, you can't blame him.
He's the current president.
He was the head of the team that kicked out Jammeh.
Yes.
Coming to the other one, I think that is the one that is reflecting actually the fundamentals more so than perception, what's happening on the ground right now. And, different governance environments have their different advantages and disadvantages. I believe in the Gambia, and, one of the problems we have in the indices is bureaucracy, red tape.
Yep.
The fact is that where you have a strong center, decisions are taken earlier.
Yes.
And so that takes away the problem of delays. And but when you have power decentralized, which I'm not saying is bad, but it has an effect, where you can have one person in an institution who is not even at a cabinet level taking adverse decisions or refusing to act on particular issues that he or she is supposed to act on. This can be frustrating, especially for somebody who is coming out from abroad trying to invest in a country. So the red tape is there, and we know that graft is in the system. It's nothing new. It's been here. It's still here. I don't see it going away any time from now. We have a problem of attitude in the public service, where people, apart from graft, actually, you see an investor come into your office, and you are paid from public coffers to deliver a service. Instead of serving this investor as your customer, like you would do in your private business, you're showing this investor that you are important, you are the boss. Maybe you have a meeting, the investor has to wait. We know processes here, even in central government, where you need a signature on a lease document and it takes you a year. Those things are here, and these are issues that have not changed year on year. So I think all of these things fed into this. My take is the issue of tracking. Like when this positive rating came, and the president, of course, was exuding all this joy, I believe, from my experience in the public service, there is no tracking mechanism present for these rankings. I think this should be a wake-up call, once and for all, that if the president thinks that it's so important for him that his country is rated positively, I think those working for him should create a mechanism to track this, to make sure that we improve, or at the very least to give him feedback as to what has happened between the time the first rating was done and now.
I want to do a follow-up point on that, and you're spot on, because I have argued that one of the fundamental challenge that we have in this economy, as long as these indices are concerned, is that when the people who compile these statistics and these facts, they gather this intelligence to come up with these indices, when they come in country, there is no central point where they go and get the information. I mean, I used to work at GIPA, and this is an issue and a concern that we had flagged and raised. Take the IMF, for example. When the IMF comes in country, the IMF would visit GIPA, the IMF would visit the Chamber of Commerce, the IMF would visit government offices, depending on what sectors are important in the economy. Tourism was frequently visited, actually, I believe, all the time. The agricultural sector, I'm sure Ministry of Agriculture and all the satellite institutions on agriculture would also be visited, and they would also go to the central bank and GBOS, as it were. But I think it is time for us as an economy to get to the point where all this intelligence that these people want to gather, all the facts that they want to gather, could be gathered from one point. Because the reason why they go from office to office is to compare notes in terms of what tourism may say, for example, vis-a-vis its performance and its contribution to the economy, number of people employed, how long is the season, and say, for example, an information that they would get from GBOS. So perhaps as a country, I don't know what your take on that is. Maybe it is high time that we try to get our act together so that the source of information regarding these international, comparative indices, when people come, they go to 1 or 2 or 3 sources at most, and then we will all be singing from the same hymn sheet and providing the same statistics rather than providing different aspects of this. I mean, what's your take on that?
Very interesting. Actually, I have practical experience in this as a junior economist at the central bank back then in the early 2000s. When the IMF missions come, we work with them, and they make sure, I don't know whether they're doing this now, I've not been to central bank for quite a while, but they used to assign somebody, like I would be assigned with a team, maybe next time Mr. Jaju, my colleagues would be assigned. I would go anywhere that an IMF team goes to get information. I'm with them. With the banks, I remember going to Hatip Jane at Jimpex then when they were interviewing him. I was there. Other institutions like ministries. I don't know whether they're doing this now. I think this is practice that should be sustained. But in retrospect, I don't actually remember sitting down with my bosses discussing what actually extra information was received from these other areas. I'm like more of a guide for them than any monitoring of the info or analysis backwards. But having mentioned this, I think it's something prudent that should be done, because you know, I just woke up before coming here and I was thinking, our data has flaws. We all know that. Even GBOS would admit that they have constraints, and it's not just the Gambia, it's other countries. As well, a lot of these indices that we are preparing ourselves are flawed. We have data issues. We have situations where we're using proxies, and our assumptions, are they all that right? I don't know. It just came off the top of my head that I am sure if Senegal is going to err in terms of data about their country, they will err in the direction of a positive towards their advantage. I'm not too sure of that about the Gambia. So since this issue of rankings is becoming quite prominent, I don't ever remember this kind of ranking getting this much attention for the public in the Gambia. So since we're getting this concerned about this, and we should be concerned, maybe, and I hate committees and task forces, I think one institution should lead, but there should be some form of collaboration. And this has to do with also the other branch, the businesses. So it's not just about collecting information and coordinating it, but to make sure that the business sector is happy. If Mr. Jagana is not happy with taxes, even if you bring all the ministers of the various sectors to come with IMF, he'll tell them I'm not happy. So back to tracking. Do something about this, and it cannot be done only by government. And also, I know Gambia, we are not very good with communication. I know that, and this has been highlighted by some of our development partners, that the current government, for instance, not all of the good things that they are doing are properly communicated, and that's a problem. So positive corrective action combined with effective communication as to the adjustments that are being made.
In general, and you mentioned it briefly, the bit on taxes, the business community, we know, pay attention to a number of economic parameters, but most importantly, taxes, which you have already mentioned. Energy tariffs, access and cost of finance, corruption, which you have also mentioned, and work ethics in terms of the attitude that you spoke about. And both the Global Competitiveness Index ranking and the Forbes ranking also look at these parameters as well. I know you made the point that the improvement in the Global Competitiveness Index ranking of the Gambia 2016, 2017, 2018, the improvement from 123 to 117 was largely as a result of the perception. And you're spot on. But in terms of these parameters of taxes, energy, high energy tariffs, cost of and access to finance, work ethics, what would you proffer as solutions that perhaps as a country we could begin to look at now against 2021 in line with the NDP that would help us? Because these are key parameters that factor very well into some of these Global Competitiveness Index rankings, be it the Forbes or be it the World Economic Forums.
I don't have a magic wand for you. From the start, let me tell you that, because of the practical experience I've had trying to tinker with the economy. It's a difficult task. And you have a situation, energy tariffs, for instance. We know that cost of energy is very high here. And we know that so long as that remains high, cost of business generally is going to remain like an albatross around our neck. Now, you have a problem here, and it's similar with the issue of taxes. people are so badly in need of energy that they don't even talk about the costs. We're talking about whether NAWEC is on and off. We are talking of generation capacity, but scarcely, apart from talking to you for the past 1 year or two, I've not heard anything about energy tariffs. So this needs to be done. I think government needs to come out with a clear policy. If there is a policy regarding that, I don't know of it. All I know from government policy communication is generation capacity, generation capacity. And I don't expect government to bring down the tariffs over a year or even two, but that's why I'm glad you're looking medium term, 2021. I think government should have a target, clearly expressed target. We want to bring cost of energy down by this particular margin, and have a pragmatic approach to it towards making this a reality. The tax situation is the same. I know, for instance, that this issue is not entirely endogenous. There are exogenous factors, because it's sad. It's sad, but I am of the view that in terms of economic policy, development policy, we are not doing any original thinking in this country. Everything is dictated by the thinking of our development partners, and that is not sustainable. When you talk about development, any government officer who is talking about the MDGs, and I'm sure our development plan anchors on that.
And the SDGs.
And the SDGs now, yes, even worse than the MDGs. And then when it comes to tax policy, for instance, we all know that we have a program with the IMF, tied to a program with the World Bank. You know, we owe monies that we need to pay, and because of that, we are constrained as to what we could do with our own resources. We know, for instance, that debt service is statutory in the budget. Add personnel emoluments, you're dealing with close to 70% of the resources in your budget. How do you reduce taxes under these circumstances? I'm sure government doesn't even want to hear this right now. They know the taxes are high, but if you look at, for instance, the knee-jerk measure they took recently in banning travel just to make sure they cut on expenditure, because they've seen that expenditure is too high compared to revenues. Again, the medium term is better, because I don't see the finance minister going to parliament this year and asking for any drastic measures in terms of reducing tax levels. But looking around 2021, hopefully we can do something. It has to come in tandem with efficiency of collection of taxes. From the President's State of the Nation address, he's giving plaudits to Gambia revenue authorities for significant improvements in terms of tax collection. I think the GRA should keep up that momentum and improve their efficiency. I don't know whether it's actually efficiency, but whatever the situation is, let them work on efficiency so that we can bring down the tax levels. Because me personally, I'm against broadening the tax base right now. I think the economy is too highly taxed already. The only improvement I see happening right now is efficiency. I saw something, a signal, very positive recently, that Gambia Ports Authority paid dividend to government. Hallelujah. I said, that's fantastic. I think government should keep an eye on these state-owned institutions, parastatals as we call them. They all have potential to generate revenue and pay government, apart from NAWEC for now. So I think these are alternative sources of revenue that we can have, that we should tap on, because I don't have much hope in terms of tax policy. Nothing more than marginal reductions of 1-2%. But I think we should do more on income tax reduction. Government has done something about it. Again, it's 1-2%. I think we should try a little bit more, because there I see an improvement concomitant of disposable income. If disposable income increases, people spend, multiplier effect. It's tough. I'm not going to blame anybody, but government needs to be a little bit braver in terms of dealing with tax issues.
I totally agree with you, and I think the state-owned enterprises have to be tasked to become efficient and generating revenue to the point of paying revenue to government instead of government subventing them, even though we know that the subvention is also a challenge. But you mentioned that there should perhaps be a policy put together for us to look at some of these issues of taxes, cost of finance, work attitude, amongst others, over a period of time, and these have to be tracked. But that leads me to another question, and that is, isn't that what the think tank should be doing? I mean, the think tank was created when Barrow came into power, but all of a sudden, I've not heard anything about the think tank. Is the think tank still in existence? I mean, and if so, what are they doing? Because these are the sort of things that they should have been looking at. The think tank, should have been looking at perhaps the Forbes Business Index ranking and engaging government and saying that, look, we need to work on these things because the perception out there, you're trying to attract foreign direct investment into the country. But these are some of the things that we now, need to begin to track. So, I mean, I don't know. Do you hear anything about the think tank? Are they in existence? And if so, what are they doing?
To start with, I didn't agree with the idea of setting up a think tank. I don't think government has any business setting up a think tank. We have a cabinet. We have boards for these parastatals. Let cabinet be our think tank. I expect people like you and Mohamed Jah coming together as private citizens, putting up a think tank and making proposals and policy papers for government, not the government to have a think tank for myriad reasons. Because I've been in government, I know that even if the think, because as far as I'm concerned, I've not felt their existence. Yeah, they're either born dead or they're comatose, one or two. Right? I've not felt their existence, but I'm telling you, even if they were existing and functioning, I don't see them making any impact here because government is too busy trying to fix the day-to-day activities of, and this whole thing is about development, the budget, the constraints are simply too much to the extent that, when people come up with these proposals about development projects, apart from those who have been identified for financing from development assistance or loans, there is practically no room for action in the budget. So the think tank, I think it's a disappointment with all the fanfare with which it was launched, and people really had hope. Me, I never agreed to it from the beginning, but the general public saw it as something really positive. They've not functioned. I'm not surprised. I think they should scrap it and government to focus more on thinking within cabinet and taking pragmatic steps.
Let's begin to delve into the specifics of the Forbes business ranking. And here I would make reference to slide 1. If we look at the ranking factors, 15 of them, property rights, innovation, taxes, technology, corruption, infrastructure, market size, political risk, quality of life, workforce, personal freedom, trade freedom, monetary freedom, bureaucratic red tape, and investor protection. And actually the good thing, and for the first time, I had to do this exercise because I like to talk on facts. I came to the realization that the Forbes index is actually a whole lot more comprehensive than the other indices in the fact that they take cue.
I'm not surprised.
Yes, they take cue and they draw from the other existing indices. The International Property Rights Index, they look at that. They look at the World Economic Forum Global Competitiveness Index. They look at the World Bank Doing Business Index. They look at the Corruption Perception Index. They look at the World Fact Book. These are all things that you've dealt with. I've dealt with. As well. And I know you mentioned in terms of the attitude that exists within the civil service, and that features here as well in terms of corruption, because we know corruption is rife within the public setting. The wrong attitude in terms of what should be done a day, people would take a year to do. You mentioned signing of leases. Incidentally, I'm pursuing one as well, and I can tell you the challenges in that as well. And even, investor protection, as well. But looking at that index, now that we've looked at the detail, and we look at West Africa. In West Africa, Gambia is last. In West Africa, as is indicated, in slide 3 here for the benefit of the viewers, Gambia is actually ranked last. So we're talking of attracting foreign direct investment into the country. We're talking of investors coming in, and investors naturally would do their homework. So if I was an investor coming from the EU or coming from the Americas, the first thing I would do is make reference to the CGI or the Forbes Business Index ranking. And if I see Gambia at the bottom, and I see Ghana at the top, followed by Senegal, then the question becomes, why should I go to Gambia? And this is one of the reasons why it is important, as you said, for us to track these things and to have someone in government tracking these things. So looking at the ECOWAS ranking and looking at the ranking parameters, What do you say? I mean, how urgent is this? I know you say it's urgent, but what should we do to bring about a reversal and help us improve at least by 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 position points?
Like, to be honest, Gambia being last in ECOWAS, actually, I found that disturbing because I don't think we are that bad. So something is not adding up here. For example, in terms of red tape and stuff like that, I know we are 10 times better than any francophone country, for instance. Yeah. They are 1,000 times worse than us in terms of bureaucracy.
Exactly.
There are issues like investor protection and property rights. We had issues about that during the JAME era. You know, I mean, I know of issues of just cancelling a major foreign investor's contract without following due process. Confiscating physical premises of a foreign investor. I mean, no matter how malevolent such investors are, and these investors are not saints, we need to know that in the Gambia. You know, I get upset when I see people say, investor come here, I've come to help in the Gambia. Help us where? You're not here to help us, you're here to help yourself. Exactly. So our public officials need to know that. An investor is not an angel, it's not Red Cross, it's not CRS. They're here to do business. So, but having said that, these investors, the genuine ones, and even the non-genuine ones, they deserve protection. If they do wrong, we should follow due process, take them to court. And you know, and it's almost all the time when there's a problem is the foreign investor taking the Gambia government to court and not the reverse. So investor protection, property rights, enforcement of contracts. I know we have very good laws in this country. Yeah. Wallahi, it's the implementation that's the problem. Yeah. And I sincerely believe that the government has the political and moral will to protect investors, to honor contracts, to render unto Caesar what is Caesar's due in terms of property rights. But I think we should communicate these things clearly, you know, and then to make sure that where there are loopholes in the law, those loopholes are completely cleared, for instance. There are other issues like market size. I think that's one of the key fundamental issues affecting us here, both in terms of population and disposable income. We are small. And I don't see this changing overnight. Government needs to think of a long-term policy, maybe in tandem with the impending exploitation of our hydrocarbons and other resources, because we are talking about oil. We don't have only oil here. We have other minerals that are being exploited. Unfortunately, it's still being done in the dark. That's very unfortunate, and I think the light should be shown on that. And because given the fact that we don't have much room in taxes, and we know we need to improve the disposable income of the average Gambian, not just for business, but for quality of life, among other things. I think these things need to be done as soon as possible.
You mentioned market size, and I know that there are things that you could change within your natural setting, and there are things that you cannot change. Gambia would forever remain small as long as population size is concerned. Yes, the population is increasing. The population has gone from under 500,000 around independence to now, 2-point-something million. If we take the projections provided by GBOS for 2018, I think about 2.1 million. But if we look at economies like Singapore as well, small population size, but big in a number of other ways. And I'm sure you would have heard of what is happening at Gambega, that they have closed shop as long as manufacturing activity was concerned. And pretty much now what they're doing is trading, as any other person would import drinks into this country and sell the drinks. Now, market size, and here I want to talk about our manufacturing sector. If we know that our market size is small, then perhaps we need to begin to look at what do we need to do to enhance the wealth of this country. And here manufacturing, comes into question. The manufacturing sector has been crying out for the longest time in terms of the support that they get, from government. Government has not done or provided any support, tangible support, meaningful support, something that would result in impact in terms of helping to grow our industries, so that those industries, when they become mature, or even before they become mature, because we've seen the likes of Salam exporting to Senegal, Mohamed Silla, Sankung Silla also exporting. And there are other companies that could do likewise, but we mentioned about energy and the challenges of energy. You know, so if we want to address this issue of market size, maybe perhaps we need to be strategic in the way we go about it and begin to provide that support to manufacturing and industry, so that even though our market size is small, the focus would not be on the market size, but we have, in ECOWAS alone, we would have over 300 million you know, people to, you know, to sell our goods and products to. So I don't know, I mean, do you think this is something that perhaps we could look into? I mean, is it feasible? Because, I mean, I didn't see much of a address or much of a provision for industries and manufacturing within the National Development Plan, as it were.
I think there's a need for urgent, creative, aggressive action in terms of exploring other avenues for improving our market size. We can't be sitting down here doing the same things year in, year out, putting forward the same excuses year in, year out, especially in the public service. One thing Gambia is very good at is at signing international agreements and protocols. Almost all the time we are number one to sign. But what are we benefiting from this? Like all these ECOWAS protocols we've signed, you know, I think we need to aggressively, and you know, what happens is everybody signs this, but Senegal, for instance, will be the first violator. You know, they'll say all the nice word when it comes to action, you know, they have 1,001 roadblocks. I think our authorities need to be a little bit more aggressive, not Jame-style aggressiveness, but diplomatic aggressiveness, positive aggressiveness, in engaging these people to make sure that these agreements we actually signing have meaning and have impact on our economy, because that's the only way out. Because as you said, we are a small market, both in terms of population and income. That's not about to change anytime soon. And that's why back then when I traveled with the former president and is appealing to certain governments and institutions come and invest here, like, invest where, for what? Where is the market? You ask Ethiopian Airlines to bring direct flights to here, who are they going to fly? How many Gambians can afford, in fact, to pay for those airfares to travel around? But having mentioned Singapore, which I know you have a lot of knowledge about, and manufacturing, I know from the former government to the present government, we keep talking about manufacturing, but I don't believe that the future of the Gambia lies in manufacturing. The factors that are militating against that are just too many, but I believe we have a comparative advantage in terms of services. And mentioning Singapore, I think there's a lot to be learned from that, at least as a starting point in terms of economic transformation. I've analyzed macroeconomic data for more than a decade. I know that more than 50% of GDP comes from services. And we've seen really, I mean, practical examples of how this sector can transform lives. Telecommunications, for instance, the emergence of AfriCell, QCell, and if you look at their books, the amount of money that's turning around, the emergence of ICT and its evolution, the fact that we have the ACE cable here, and the fact that every young Gambian has a smartphone. Before we let these people use these smartphones to create havoc and chaos in the public space, why don't we harness their creativity and energy? One of the constraints there too, and I want to say this again, we have a Ministry of Information Communication Technology. Fantastic policy drive that we have a ministry that recognizes that ICT is the future. But we keep appointing journalists as ministers for this ministry, from Jamestown down to the current government. This is not a ministry of propaganda. This is a ministry of modern new technology, and I think the government should learn from that and start appointing the right people in that ministry so that we can take this leap. Because as far as I'm concerned, a lot of what's happening in the ICT sector, for instance, is just the ingenuity and drive of private investors, but our government is not doing much in terms of encouraging people to harness the potential in this sector, and the government is not doing much in terms of policy framework and actual investment, because sometimes in R&D you have to invest. I'm not saying American level investment or so, but we have ICT hubs here sponsored by the UN in Bakau Soma. After a couple of months, they all went down. You know, and I know what the problems there is, just basic stuff to fix. And I think even though that was one of the smartest moves that the ICT ministry did, especially creating this access for young people up country,
Yep.
but they stopped there. Nothing has been done since then. I believe that services, government needs to focus more on that, especially given the concrete challenges, especially in terms of energy and market size vis-a-vis manufacturing.
Whilst I agree with you that services accounts for over 50% of our gross domestic product, and that it is an area that we need to focus on as well, I am of the view that, you know, Gambia, unlike Singapore, is blessed. Yes, our population size is small, but if you look at the size of the population vis-a-vis the size of our land area, I think, you know, we have agriculture and we could, you know, maximize on agriculture.
You know
as
what's
well.
Interesting?
Yeah, but let me just land, and then we need to, that agricultural produce that we are producing needs to be channeled into the manufacturing mainstream, whether it's processing of agricultural produce into finished agricultural goods, be it tomato paste, you know, be it canned foods, you name it. Singapore focused on services because you know and I know that they don't have the land. That's why they build and go up. Even the water, they don't have. They import from Malaysia, you know. But I think there's an opportunity. And even if I should use Singapore as an example here, they started with manufacturing. But what they did, because they knew, as you're saying right now, that the future is in services. And the future is in services because any economy, I mean, in basic economics, they teach you that economies progress from the agricultural sector. You know, I mean, even if you look at the history of the world, it was an agrarian economy to a manufacturing outfit and ultimately services. You know, and I think, you know, it is good if a country has that, is able to go through that progression. I mean, you would underpin your economy much better than, you know. So I don't know whether that changes your mind.
Honorable Ben, I'm sure you know the concept of creative destruction.
Of course,
pioneered by Joseph Schumpeter.
Joseph Schumpeter, yeah.
If Singapore started in manufacturing, that doesn't mean we have to start from.
Of course not. Yes.
We can leapfrog.
Okay.
But where I wanted to interrupt you was about the issue of agriculture, and there I agree with you. There's no Gambia without agriculture, especially where you have people from Kiang and the Sarahules. They like to eat, you know. We need to produce what we eat, at the very least. But the interesting fact is that these services I'm talking about, the numbers from the GDP, agriculture plays a significant role in terms of trading of these products. So this can be done, but like the challenges again, especially energy in terms of manufacturing. I'm not saying we should completely disregard it. Agriculture, yes, I'm with you. I think anything we can push in terms of agriculture, we should actually do that. But I am more inclined to pushing for services and allow, of course, on agriculture. Agriculture is the mainstay of the economy. The rest, I would deal with them, but as not top priority for me. Okay. But I can't emphasize enough the need for the government to recognize this and to provide the policy support and even fiscal support for the growth of service industry.
Let me ask this question. When the coalition won the elections and we had a new government, we all spoke about the new Gambia and the new dispensation. But we know that there are challenging structural issues as long as our economy is concerned.
Yes.
And these are structural challenges that, if they are to be addressed, some painstaking sacrifices have to be made. And not what we see currently obtaining within the economy in terms of going about business as usual. You mentioned how the Minister of Finance have taken this bold step to put, you know, if you will, a moratorium. I mean, on travels. You know, banning travels unless it was a must or is free, meaning it's being funded by our partners. Now, is this government, or are we as a country, do we realize as a country that if the new Gambia is to become the Gambia that we envisage, the Gambia that we want, that we must suffer first and make some painstaking decisions trying to address our structural reforms. And who knows how long that would take. Maybe it would take anywhere from 3 to 5 years or 5 to 10 years. But it's a sacrifice that we have to make once and for all so that we can crawl out of this challenge and get out of this vicious cycle that we have been going through round and round about again. What's your take on that? Like, and I could give you some examples. For starters, a reassessment of the civil service. The number of people employed within the civil service. Do we need those number of people? Yeah, I mean, we've served under JAME and we've spoke about civil service reform, but as long as I'm concerned, I don't know about you, not much has been done in that regard. That's one.
It never happened.
Yeah. The state-owned enterprises that you mentioned, getting them to operate on management performance contracts and obliging them to be paying quantum that are based on assessments made to government. And in the process, undertaking structural reforms like NAWEC. Even the ports. So do we as Gambians realize that these are hard, painstaking things that we have to undertake if we have to begin to make change and progress towards the new Gambia dispensation?
I think we've not made this realization yet, unfortunately. I think the public's expectation was too high with the change of dispensation, and the government didn't do much to moderate that level of expectation, the unrealistic expectations, of course. So, and I know we are in a transition arrangement. Already people are talking of election, whether it's 3 years or 5 years, and we have to be fair to these politicians that survival comes first. But I think this government still has a lot of goodwill. I mean, part of it has eroded due to unexpected circumstances, but I believe that the government still has a lot of goodwill, and before the challenges get bigger, they need to communicate with the public quite clearly that the challenges are too many. I recently put up a post for social media which I have not released yet. It's like, President Jawara inherited the problems of the colonial era. Jame inherited the problems of Jawara, and the problems that Jawara left here were huge. Jame left his own problems, which are actually big to handle and complicated and complex. And we know we're going through a transition where they're trying to establish what really happened here and there. And so the problems that this government is handling, I get upset when people say, hey, they 22 years of blah, blah. It's not 22 years. This country is not 22 years old. It inherited 52 years. I mean, not all that 52 years is bad for sure, to be fair to the previous governments. There is good and bad in every administration, even the Americans that they are worshipping. If they were to launder their dirty laundry in public, people will be shocked. So there are problems, and the government needs to, and this is the time, because the longer it takes, the more complicated. For instance, when the education issue came, when the kids flunked these WASC exams, and the authorities were trying to whitewash it, it's better than the previous year. I said, no way, this is not your problem. No right-minded Gambian can blame this coalition government for the problems we have in education. So it should be easy for government to tell the public, look, this is a problem we inherited. We need to fix this, but we need to do it together. Invite them, show them the problem. This is the problem. One of my bosses told me, when I give you an assignment, if you have a problem, you tell me it's my problem and yours, we work on it. But if you don't tell me until the time for delivery comes and you don't deliver, I'll deal with you because you didn't tell me the problem. So I think the government should come in a very pragmatic way and communicate with the public. We want to do X, Y, and Z. These are the constraints. We can't do it alone. Let us work together to fix these problems, and then we'll get to the promised land. But there are issues like, for instance, you mentioned the size of the public service, for instance. The ideal economist in me would say slash it, but there's politics in economics in political economy. It would not be reasonable to fire people from the public service right now because the unemployment rate is already too high. So for me, what I would think is back to the issue of attitude, get the right leaders in the right ministries and departments to get out as much from these people for the money that we are paying them as possible. And I've done that. When I took over GRTS, I was asked to fire. I was actually mandated to fire people, otherwise I'd be fired. I refused to fire anybody. But I made sure they delivered. We had instant impact. And I think that can be done. But reducing the size of the public service, I don't see it happening any soon. In terms of the parastatals, I think government needs to watch keenly. We know that there was a lot of tinkering with the parastatals, for instance, from the center in the Jammeh government. Jammeh would tell parastatal do X, Y, and Z, sometimes in areas that are not actually their mandate, and that's bad. But leaving these parastatals alone also to do whatever they want to do, I think we'll deal with another crisis. So government needs to put in, as you said, make assessments, of course. We don't want to just come out and throw numbers at them and hold them accountable for things that are not realistic. But you want to give them targets to meet. You want to make sure public resources that are within the purview of those parastatals are properly and efficiently monitored, because the public is watching. For instance, the social security issue, which I don't want to delve in, the public all of a sudden said, this is our money, we want to know X, Y, we have a stake. So government, I don't think, should wait for another social security situation to be a little bit more keen, more vigilant, a little bit stricter. You know, I know we want democracy, you know, from the backdrop of some of these unpleasant things that happen. We want to give people some room to maneuver and chill. We cannot afford it. The numbers are too stark.
On perhaps the last point that we would discuss on this program, the bit regarding, and I'll go back to the Forbes ranking. You made this point that you had a boss who told you, if I give you an assignment and there are challenges, come to me and let's discuss the issues, pretty much so that we could re-strategize to ensure that the task that is given is delivered on. The Forbes business ranking, you had also said that you do not agree in terms of Gambia's ranking as last. And I share the same views with you on that as well. But the question here is, should we as a government and as a country go to Forbes and try to better understand how it is and what it is that has led to our ranking, to ensure that we, and it boils down to the tracking that you're talking about, begin to prepare ourselves to improve on our ranking, because it's definitely not a good sign. And any investor that you give the opportunity of these 15 countries in ECOWAS, this is the Forbes ranking, which country would you choose? They would choose Ghana, they would choose Senegal, they would even choose Guinea-Bissau over the Gambia, perhaps if not for language barrier. And we know that language as a barrier now, it's pretty much non-existent.
You can Google it.
You can Google it. Or you can Google Translate it. So that's not the issue. But, do you reckon, from your previous experiences, that there is need for engagement with Forbes?
Absolutely, without a doubt. Yeah. I didn't think about that actually in the beginning, but I think it's a brilliant idea. And I think if we do it, it will benefit us, because we need to fully understand first what's going on with the ranking. I know the data is from here generally, but how do they deal with this data? We need to understand that. If I were the president, I would just do my own task force, maybe not more than 3 that will be reporting to me directly. Other issues to deal with is, does GAIPA have a CEO right now? And then fix these things. We cannot afford to sleep. You know, there's this saying that if you are surrounded by vultures, you must not try to die. It's a competitive world. Globalization is devouring us. You know, the person you think or the entity you think is your friend in this global game might actually be your enemy. They might actually be feeding misinformation about your economic potentials, because they want to attract the best. You're competing with people. There are entities within the sub-region that actually claim certain good things that were in Gambia. They claim that it was in their country, and it's easy to believe that, because our country is inserted into a bigger whale, and we should not assume that this whale will always be friendly to us.
Viewers, thank you. That was all we had for you today. Our discussions have centered on a very important publication, and that is the Forbes Business Index ranking. As a country, we are of the view that the ranking is of concern. Gambia is ranked 152nd out of 153 countries. Within Africa, we are second to last. Within ECOWAS, we are last. Should the government sit and not take to task the people who have put this composite together? Should the government task a particular institution, GAIPA has been mentioned, perhaps the Chamber of Commerce from a private perspective, for them to engage to better understand how is it that out of all the 15 African countries, taking into consideration the realities that exist on those economies, Gambia is ranked last. Should this be a concern, and what is it that we're going to do about it as a country? The Ministry of Finance, GAIPA, the government, the private sector through GCCI all have a stake in this. Honorable Sabali, it was a pleasure to have you on the program, and thank you for coming on the Business and Economy program.
Thank you for having me.
I hope we'll see you again.
Inshallah.
Thank you.
Much appreciated.
Viewers, you can equally follow all of these issues on social media, QTV Gambia. It's on Twitter, it's on Facebook, and it's on Instagram. Thank you.
Come and visit the new Ajib Bank today. Ajib is the only Islamic bank in the Gambia. We offer Sharia compliant services, products and financing modes. Ajib have invested in ultra-modern technology in the state-of-the-art core Islamic banking software IMAL. Ajib ATMs are located in our branches at Banjul, New Joshuan, Brikama, Basse, QCell head office and Brisubi turntable. You can check your balance, withdraw cash, get your mini statement and much more. Ajib also provides 24/7 internet banking, which offers you the comfort of banking from your office or your homes. Come and visit the new Ajib Bank today and enjoy our services delivered by a team of banking professionals. For a limited time, you can get an Ajib ATM card absolutely free. For more information, contact us on 346-6666 or 327-7777. Ajib, your partnership bank.